on to evolution. The administrative staff has processed your examination, and hopefully they'll be posting those scores later this afternoon. You guys did very well. I'm very pleased with it. So the metrics on it are, the mean was a 76.5. Great job. Standard deviation was a 13. The max is 100%. Well done. Low was a 30. Curve is perfectly normal. Looks great. I don't have a lot to say about it. So if you got a good score, keep on doing what you're doing. If you did it, and you put a lot of work in, if you clicked on your own, you know how you stand. So again, that's a job well done. I don't have much to say about that. If you have to low or high or somewhere on the edges, I'd let you know. But quite effective. But like I said, if you're doing well, continue to do exactly what you're doing. I don't have a lot to say, except job well done. Perfect. So because of that, it's a straight scale. You're looking at typical 60, 70, 80, 90 scale on that. Get a 90, you got an A. 80, you got a B. 60, you got a D. 70, you got a C. It's not a long history here. If you have any questions about the examination, you're more than welcome to come out by my office hours and review it. Hard copy does not come back. Scan-con is yours, of course. So if you want to see any particular questions, just drop by office hours and you can view the hard copy of the exam. Any questions before you start today? Okay. Hopefully the coordinators will have that posted later today. I know they have a meeting that's at 1 o'clock. I just got this information before I came to class. So I anticipate, if they get lucky, it'll be in before 6 today, hopefully. Okay? Anything else? All right, great. So let's move forward then. Hopefully your performance on the finals is as good as the performance on the midterm. That's also about 3.5 points higher than the academic year standard. It's a job well done, guys. Right? It's not easy. Okay? So 4 points higher. Good. Okay, so evolution. So remember the dichotomy between ecology and evolution. So for ecology, it seems super easy. How many things are there? Where are they at? Right? But the why was incredibly difficult and complex. And as you advance through ecology, if you found ecology to be an interesting subject or topic, if you go to higher levels of ecology, you see there's lots of math to it, so you need to be fairly fluent, at least in statistics, okay? The calculus doesn't hurt. But it's a very complicated science. There's a lot of experimentation that goes on with it, there's lots of theory, and it's really vibrant growing because ecology fuels conservation biology. So if you need to know conservation biology, which is a highly recommended field, unfortunately we're working on Con Bio major right now. Probably too late for you guys. You probably won't be ready by then by the time it goes through the approval process. But we hope to have that conservation biology program up and running within about 3 years. But it's going to take a while to get there. It's fueled directly by ecology. So evolution, you kind of flip it. On its surface, it appears to be really complex, but it's not. Evolution is so simple. It's so easy. Right? So we're going to kind of walk through the paces of evolution. The mathematics can get thick on it just like they can for ecology if you pursue it at higher levels. But kind of at its base fundamental level, it's a really simple idea. And so you guys are coming from a wide variety of backgrounds. Some people are coming from private schools, public schools. Some people are taught evolutionary theory really well. Some people not at all. Some people kind of in the middle. Most people are taught pretty crappy. Okay? So rather than dive right into advanced evolutionary theory with a bunch of mathematical constructs and things like that, I find it much more beneficial for you guys to set you up with a fundamental understanding of the concepts of evolutionary theory. All right? And so I'm going to kind of rebuild it. Some of you I've heard in high school, other times you might not have heard any of this. And I want to set up the proper framework for you. Because if you understand the proper framework, you're going to be successful in all of biology. So if you understand evolutionary theory, it benefits every single aspect of biology. I don't care what field it is. Microbiology, biochemistry, ecology, marine biology, the fundamental idea that frames it all
creates the infrastructure as an understanding of evolutionary theory. If you don't understand that, the rest is just a bunch of disassociated facts that don't mean anything. All right? So we're going to spend some time reinforcing that framework and running our way through it. So evolution, now as we look it up, it just simply says this: change through space and time. Lots of things evolve. The planet evolves. The universe evolves. Evolution is a common and thematic standard throughout our known universe. All right? Things change through space and time. It's that simple. Well, when we think about biological evolution then, which is no different than the change in the world around us and the universe around us, we're really changing us, right, as a human species, us in terms of living organisms, right? So biological evolution is this: it's genetically based change in a line of descent over time. It's exactly the same thing. Genetically based change in a line of descent over time, space and time change. We commonly think of that as descent with modification. The descent is through time part. The modification is the things that change in you, right? Well, what are the things that change in you? We're going to come back to these three topics: time and time again with evolution. And they're basic. It changes the way you look, morphology. It changes the way you act, behavior. And it changes the way you function, physiology. Those are the adaptations that you have. That's evolution. That's the core of evolution. All right? So individuals and populations show different forms of their traits. Look around the room. We're all human beings. We're all from exactly the same species. Do we look the same? Superficially, we all kind of, we stand upright. Our eyes are all in the same places. But when you look carefully, we're totally different. Eye color, hair color, height, weight, distance between eyes, you name it. Everything's different. Femur length, finger length, width. There's so much variation, even within the group right in this room. It's really pretty amazing. Your first question should be what? Why? Right? Why so much variation within the norm? So basically, individuals of populations display this wide variation in their traits. The frequency of those different forms relative to one another, they can change over successive generations, and that's the core of evolution. So all these traits and the proportion in which they're found in the room can change. That's the stuff of evolution. The real question is not that they can change, but it's how do they change and why. That's what's really fundamental to the understanding of evolution. We all have the traits, that's not a big deal. But why do they change from one generation to the next, and what drives that change? That's evolution. So when we think about evolution, often when you guys first presented with the idea, you saw it in a textbook with this picture right here. Right? How many of you have seen this picture down at the bottom? Raise your hands high. All right? That picture sucks. It's one of the biggest reasons why people in the general population do not understand evolutionary theory. All right? Because what does this basic picture denote? What is it suggesting? That evolution is what?
Linear.
A linear chain of events. Evolution is not a linear chain of events. Evolution looks like that. It is a crazy branching tree of experimentation. All right? It is not a linear branch, a linear sequence like that. This suggests that if you trace it back far enough, hey, we came from a chimpanzee. Yeah, you know, wrong. All right? It doesn't work that way. You still see it in the textbook. This is a form of evolution we're going to talk about in terms of evolutionary thought, but it's not what evolution is thought to be today as a cohesive theory. You still find it in the textbooks, and it's taught in this manner, and it clouds everyone's ideas, because the first thing people say is, I didn't evolve with some damn monkey. Well, no, duh, you did it, all right? But that's what they perceive based on the picture, which is so common. So we talked about this idea that one of our biggest faults as scientists is what? Communication. That's exactly right. We communicate great amongst ourselves with other scientists. We do a terrible job in the general population. And this couldn't be a better example of that. We have done a horrendous and terrible job of communicating what evolutionary theory is to the general population, right? And it's caused all kinds of backlash and this and that. I don't believe that, I don't believe this. I don't care what they believe. I just want them to understand it, but they don't do that either, right? So that's your goal. If you can take what you learned in the next 3 weeks here and talk to someone who has no understanding about evolutionary theory and tell them how it works, you did well in this class, okay? You achieved my primary goal, which is to be able to do that. So, again, just to summarize, we're going to fix this misconception. This is not a linear chain. This is a snapshot in time of what's happened. So basically what it's taking is this picture over here, and it's basically snapshots of it. So for instance, the front one is us, right? That's modern human beings, Cro-Magnon. What's behind it? Neanderthal. However, what does it imply? We evolved from Neanderthal. And we were around at the same time. They just went extinct before we did. If you take a look at the very two top skulls on the other side, that's us and them. There was interbreeding between the two groups. Each of you has a certain chunk of Neanderthal DNA in them from that someplace, some more than others. All right, I don't mean that in a facetious way. Actually, one of my TAs is kind of funny, actually. One of my TAs, we're working on an online course, which is basically the non-majors version of this, right? Kind of an overall biology course. And have you ever seen that 23andMe thing? The stuff where you identify for DNA? Well, we did one of those real in depth, and it identifies how much Neanderthal DNA you had. And hers was exceptionally high. Which is why she will never live down in my eyes, ever. Right? It's pretty funny. So, again, these are snapshots, but they're not a line, right? These things were around at the same time. So again, this is the common perception that you find in the general population. The branching is correct, this is incorrect. And we want to delete those ideas. Were these things around? They were. But many of them were living at exactly the same time. One did not follow from the other. One did not evolve from the other. They had ancestors that they shared. All right. So just like ecology, I want to present the evolution, really, right? How did that idea come to play? It wasn't just like Shazam, I snap my fingers and there's evolutionary theory. It comes from a long lineage of development to the point where we are today. So I love evolution because it answers basic human questions, right? And so what is the most basic human question? Who am I? It's a standard human question, right? It's who am I? Where did I come from? And finally, where am I going? And evolution answers that, right? It can tell me where I've been. If I know where I'm at and I know the conditions in the future, it can also predict what's going to happen in the future. So it's really a fabulous theory. Easily top 6 in the ideas that have been postulated by man to describe this known universe, all right? Right up. So the earliest roots of this begin with the origin theory, like many other things, right? Myth and superstition. And so to answer those basic questions, how did I get here? Who the heck am I? And where am I to be going? That's how it starts. We go back to Aristotle again, right there at the point. For ecology, it's right here for evolutionary theory. And he actually created this thing called the Scala Naturae. And so he, again, fabulous observer of the natural world, looked out on the natural world, and he said, you know what? All these living things are organized. They share things in common, right? All these things are alive, they have similar traits, they have fingers like you in some cases, digits look the same, they have eyes, well, there's similarity. And so he conceived of this hierarchy of life, a way to organize life. And he envisioned it as a living thing, a tree, right? A tree that grew and changed, a fluid thing, right? A thing that was alive. He described a hierarchical system that was alive just like the life he described, right? So in this case, things were connected to each other. Now, his classification scheme was kind of weird. It was based on all kinds of weird things, like not only the way that you looked or you acted or you behaved, but also things like your nobility, things that are almost impossible to quantify. Like he figured that second to us was like the elephant because they were noble creatures, so it had a weird scaling to it. It didn't have DNA or anything like that, right? But so it had some weird anomalies. But the idea of life is interconnected and fluid is really what's important here. And what's really interesting about it is this is one of the very first ideas about life and how it's organized. And it ended up deviating from this for a long period of time, and then we come right back to it in modern times. So it's like it started out correct, we lost it, we go back to correct again, except for the kind of the way that he thought about the ordering system itself. But this idea of the fluidity and connection of life is really important. The Stoic philosophers in the 1st century AD, these are the followers of Zeno. They come from a sect that basically was, they thought it was humans devoid of passion, basically. The idea was you could never make a logical decision unless you got rid of your emotions. That's a great idea, but it will never happen, okay? Human beings are emotional creatures. You can never get rid of your emotions. You might try to suppress them, but then you'll end up with some psychotic break sooner or later. It's a part of who you are. You can't be 100% logical. You would love to be, but it just isn't part of our nature, right? So that was their idea. That has nothing to do really with evolution. What it was is they were also interested in fossils. And so they go looked at fossils as evidence of past life, and this is really important. They looked around, they found this ginormous bone. And they're like, well, this thing isn't here today. It must have lived in the past and is no longer here. It's extinct. It's gone. Now, they cleanly fit this into their own mythology, right? So if I find this giant bone, well, it's now the bone of a what? A cyclops or whatever the heck it was. That's something, was part of their mythology. And that's what it was. Well, we know today that bone today is part of a brontosaur or something like that, a patasaur. But in those days, that fit the logic, right? We have all this mythology of the gods and all these fantastical creatures, and here are the bones that give us the evidence for it. But the real take-home here is, even though that's inaccurate, the take-home is it's evidence of past life. That was true. That's accurate. So we have some really important things coming out of Greek philosophy. Life is fluid. Life is connected. It changes. And also, we have evidence of that life in the past in the form of fossils. It's a great start. It's a great start. Doesn't go so great after that. Okay? Things kind of tends to deviate a little bit in terms of development of evolutionary theory. So basically what happens is eventually the Greek culture is dominated by the Roman culture after the overthrow of the Greeks by the Romans. Romans are a pragmatic people. Did they exterminate the Greeks? They just absorbed them. Okay? And so think about all of the culture and the amount of intellect that was in the Greek society. So what happened was those Greek philosophers now were sitting in Rome as teachers of the Roman children, of the aristocracy. So all those basic ideas just went right into Roman culture. They were completely subsumed, right? They just became part of Rome. And so all these basic ideas held forth, but eventually the Roman Empire collapses under its own weight. It's too big, it expanded too fast. There's not enough Romans to go around, basically. Whenever runs a Roman, no one's a Roman. That was kind of the idea of it. Plus, they had lead pipes. Not a great idea for the long haul in terms of generational IQ. And so the things started to break down, and they collapsed upon themselves. There was no power vacuum. It needed to be filled, and the church rose up to fill that power vacuum. That's kind of the quick and dirty of the history right there. Right? And so in this particular case, as the church rose up, doctrine changed. And so the basic idea was a revision of Aristotle's original ideas. And so instead of being kind of a fluid tree, the idea was that life was a chain of being from the lowest to the highest form. So you kind of work your way up the list, right? So there was human beings, and then there was angels, and then God at the top. And that each of those things were created, designed, and forged at the same time. And the really important part here is it's immutable. What does that mean? It cannot be changed. Why can it not be changed? What's that?
It'll go against the church.
Yeah, but it's more important than that. There's like a fundamental reason why it's immutable. If God created it, it must be perfect. That's the idea of it, okay? And so that's why it's unchanging. Once you're designed and forged, you're done. That's it. All right, so this brings us to Albertus Magnus in 1300 AD. And what he did was he ripped off human beings from the scale of nature. So he had Aristotle's little scale right there, and he said, we don't belong on that, right? He said, we should be taken off. We're separate from that. And his student gave him the rationale for doing it. So his student was Sir Thomas Aquinas. And his idea was that all humans are divine and have a soul, and the rest of the animals and plants and things like that do not. And so therefore, we should not be on the same scale with them. So that was the rationale for doing it. So what happened here is we have a really massive change. We go from an idea of kind of fluid continuum to more of an idea of rigid, locked in with no change whatsoever, and then this idea of the soul. Well, the idea of the soul is not a scientific phenomenon, it's a religious phenomenon. It's something that we cannot test scientifically. So I can't prove nor disprove something like that, right? It's not the providence of science. But some interesting things were going on this day. So the idea of the soul was really important, discussions of it. And one of the ideas was, well, how do you transfer soul? So there was this interesting idea called the homunculus theory. Have you guys ever heard of it? So the homunculus theory is basically this idea that the soul was actually in the sperm. And so the egg was an empty vessel, right? Devoid of the soul. It's kind of a misogynistic idea, right? And so in the sperm was the soul. And the idea was if you look closely enough at the head of the sperm, you could see a little man curled up in there. That little man was the soul. Is that accurate? Not by what we know. If you look closely enough at the sperm, what are you going to find in there? You're going to find what? Chromosomes with 23 copies, right? And then what are you going to find in mom's egg? Is it devoid? No, there's the exact analog on her side that combined together to create the Encyclopedia Britannica of what makes a human being. So, but it's an interesting idea, right? So that's how the soul was transferred at birth. And so these ideas went on for a long period of time, and they can be summed up in the theory of creationism, right? So the theory of creationism holds three basic tenets. Number one, that God created the earth and all life on it. Okay? Number two, life's immutable. God created it, it's perfect, so it doesn't change. And then the earth is young, 6,000 to 10,000 years old. How do you know that? How do they know that? Now you know that. How do they know that? From what? From the Bible. That's exactly right. So basically, if you go back and you look at the Bible as a literal text, and you do all the work with the dates, you can typically get back to these dates around this figure, which means earth is young. Some of them are really technical. There was this one guy named Bishop Wilberforce who deducted that the earth was, I can't remember the exact date, but it was like the earth was done in such and such BC at 9 a.m. on Sunday morning or something. It was that technical, really pretty intense. So these are the three basic tenets, right? God creates everything, immutable because it's perfect, and the earth is young. And that's what it looked like for a long period of time. However, with the advent of the Renaissance and sailing ships, people were traveling the world. They were seeing more than their own little corner of the world. When people have enough money and enough time, they travel. And when your primary thought is, I must eat to survive, you don't think about a whole lot more than that, right? But when you have money, time, leisure, you think bigger than that, typically, is what happens. You have the leisure to do that, and so you do. And so people were traveling, and they were starting to see some things around the world that didn't necessarily fit cleanly with those three basic tenets. So let's talk about some of the things people were seeing as they sailed around the world, as people were traveling and seeing new things. The first is biogeography, which is basically an examination of the global distribution of organisms. We talked about this in terms of biogeographic realms, right? So here's the basic observation. As you travel around the world, you see many plants and animals that are really unique to isolated places. They're only found in like one particular place, that's it. But you also find animals that are separated from great distances, but yet they look very similar to each other. Do exactly the same type of things, live in the same way. Well, how do you explain that? That's a real question, right? How do you explain it? So your observations are, sometimes I find isolated things nowhere else. Other times I see things all over the place, very similar, but separated by really, really great distances. Here's a nice example. Rhea, South America, emu, Australia, ostrich, Africa. Okay. First of all, the habitat they live in is what? Grasslands. They're identical. It doesn't matter. They're exactly the same. The species of grass might be different, but the system itself in terms of an ecosystem is identical. When I look at the birds, do they look very similar? Superficially. Yeah, they're the same shape, the same size. Can they fly? No. None of them can fly. They try. It's very embarrassing to watch. They do have wings. They flap them when they try to. It's kind of pitiful. They can't fly, but they can do what very well? They can run. An ostrich can run 65 miles an hour. Think about that next time you're on the freeway. Okay? It's kind of crazy, right? So these things are fast. They behave in similar ways. They operate in similar ways. However, they're also different. When I look at them, does the plumage look the same? No. Especially for the African male ostrich, it's really different, right? It's got the big, beautiful black coloring and the white on it. These ones are more muted and kind of brown in terms of the color. The head shape is a little bit different for each, especially for the emu. Eye color is quite different. Ostrich eye and rhea eyes are quite the same, but emu eyes are bright red. If you ever want to see these things close up, there's an ostrich farm that's, what's that little fake Swedish town north here I was reading? Solvang, right? That's probably not the way you want to advertise it in the first place, right? But anyway, on your way into Solvang, there's actually an ostrich farm right there, and you can see them going in. And for like $5 or something, they'll give you a big pan of food, you can go feed them. And you can go see them up close and realize, because most of the time you see them at zoos and things like that, you need to see them right up on top of you to get a real appreciation for them. So these things are actually the living descendants of who? Dinosaurs. All right? That's what birds are. They're living descendants of dinosaurs. And you can get a real appreciation for that when you look at ostrich, in particular, and emu. So one of the things you look at, especially for ostriches, is look at their feet when they walk up to you. And if you were to strip those feathers off and you saw the scales underneath that are on those feet, you'd be amazed. It looks just like dinosaur, big, just feet like this, all scaled, you know, looks like a typical dinosaur that you would see in like a reconstruction or a movie or something like that. And then when you look at the emu, you can really get a look at their scaly features on their face and things like that, very dinosaur-like. Unfortunately, these birds are not the brightest tools in the shed. So birds in particular, many of them don't have a high intellect from our perspective, which is the ability to learn. Some do, like parrots and minor birds and blue jays, amazing intellect, right? But many birds are hardwired from the moment they're born to the moment they die. It's already coded into them like a computer. Whatever was pre-programmed, that's what they got. Ostriches are a lot like that, okay? They're not too bright, but they are very curious in some ways. But their curiosity can be damaging because when you're 6 foot plus high, and you're curious, you don't have hands to reach out, so how do they do it? They peck. And so one of the things they find curious are your eyeballs. So if you go up to feed them, please don't lean in too close. And if you do, make sure you have sunglasses on. Because what they'll do is see the bright, shiny lights of your eyes and decide to peck at it, because it's interesting to look at. But it's a cool experience if you want to see them like this. Make sure if you're not going to wear sunglasses, you invite me so I can watch the show. Right?